have a group of writers, most of whom are also sitting around in the horseshoe behind you, and their books will be for sale. So please, if you like what you hear, we encourage you to go vote with your pocketbooks and wallets and credit cards. And Redwood Writers is the largest chapter of the California Writers Club.
Yay!
Yay! Woo-hoo! And the reason we have members who are participatory, who write, and as you know, our motto is Writers Helping Writers. If you've got questions about the journey of publishing, if you have questions about how your book would fit in, how to actually publish your book, this is the best place on earth. And we intend to be more visible in the coming years because we want to share this goodness with those of the people in the world, in our area, who don't know about us. Ms. Jeannie Sloan is our VP in charge of author launch and Sonoma County Fair. But today she's in her author launch mode. And do you want this, or you're going to be doing that one?
This one? Perfect. So let's give her a big round of applause.
You'll have to excuse my hoarse voice. I hope you can all hear me.
Yes.
Good. Okay. I want to make sure everybody has a program. Could you raise your hand if you don't? Adele? There's 2 people. Because I want you to look inside the program. Every time an author comes up to read, I want you to look at their face and their biography, because we will not be reading all the biographies. Welcome everyone, finally, to Author Launch. And I'm saying that because we've been on Zoom for 2 years. And it's very hard to serve cake on Zoom. So I like to be here in person. I am the author of 4 historical novels about women, amazing women, during World War II. I'm not here about me. I'm very happy to see your bright and shining faces, not on a screen. Well, okay. Each author will be reading for 5 minutes from their book, the most important or favorite part, and I will be keeping time because we do have 20 wonderful authors here. Don't forget to read their biography. We're going to have the first 10 authors, one at a time, of course, read. And then after the 10 authors are done, we're going to have a 20-minute break. During that time, please help yourself to refreshments. Go around, introduce yourself to the authors, ask them questions, and you're welcome to buy an autographed copy of their books. Well, let's start the show. Please turn off all your devices. I found that to be one of the most important lessons. The order of speaking is in the brochure, so the first shiny face you see. Open up your brochure. and you'll see Dr. Carla Manley. So come on up, Dr. Carla Manley. She will read from her book, Smart Dating, a non-fiction to empower relationships.
Hi there. Is that loud enough? I know I speak, I speak very quietly.
Be sure you get it right up, yeah, right up to your, and if that doesn't work, use the handheld.
Here we go.
Yeah.
Much better.
Much better.
Okay, hi.
Excellent.
I'm Dr. Carla Marie Manley. I'm a clinical psychologist. I live in Sonoma County, California. Date Smart is my third baby, and my fourth is out next year. So why did I write Date Smart? That's probably the most important thing. In my work with individuals and groups, I've really found that one of the most common issues people encounter is success in their love relationships. And so what I realized, as I do with all my books, if I'm trying to help the public, which is my mission in life, to help make the world a better place, one book at a time, one paragraph at a time, that if I helped people understand how to not only read about healthy relationships, but practice bringing healthy relationships into fruition, I would be on the right path. And as I do with all of my self-help books, I actually, and it's the same way I work in my clinical practice, I give people the idea of how to put things into practice. So every book has self-help exercises, so that what you're learning as you read, you're putting into practice. So that is what Date Smart is all about. It is also really focused on how to build love from the inside out. So if we know ourselves and love ourselves and learn how to be really true to who we are and what we want, which is always a work in progress, then we end up being, better in relationships, and we tend to have better relationships. So the part I chose to read in Date Smart is about common dating hiccups. And it's interesting because with common dating hiccups, it's also common hiccups in relationships. Because so many times what we run into when we're in a relationship, whether it's with a partner or with a friend, it's communication that tends to get in the way. So, common dating hiccups. Too many people have learned to believe that life and love should be easy. We're chronically exposed to deceptive illusions that tell us love should be magically perfect. Love is not perfect. It never will be. Shift your expectations to embrace real love with all its challenges and imperfections. Look at relationship issues in a straightforward way. You can make your mindful efforts pay off. You can make love extraordinary, but you can never make it perfect. Many dating issues arise simply because a person truly is not in the right mental space to date. Whether you're grieving from the ending of a long-term partnership, dealing with a heavy load of personal challenges, or healing from a toxic relationship, there are times when dating and starting a new relationship simply isn't the best move. During these times in life, it's important to give yourself much needed care and downtime, because dating and new relationships take an incredible amount of time and energy. Sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is to take a time out from dating. And then, so I'll pause there. In the chapters, I also give fun facts, and here's one of the facts. Ending a bad relationship can help you grow. Self-expansion is a vital part of life. It helps us answer the questions: where am I? What are my capacities? How do I see life? Interesting research indicates that those who ended a relationship that provided an insufficient level of self-expansion experienced greater rediscovery of the self, more positive emotions, and less loss of self after the relationship dissolved. It can also be wise to allow yourself a dating break if you found yourself in serial, unhealthy dating relationships. When a break from dating is used to engage in conscious self-reflection and healing, your mental health and overall well-being truly benefit. So that's an excerpt from Date Smart, And the other thing I thought might be helpful, rather than going on and reading parts of it, is to help you just hear 2 reviews that I really like, and I just picked them out of a hat this morning. So this one says, I found this self-help book to be like that friend you go to bounce off your concerns and be reassured. Even if you're experienced in relationships of all sorts, it was helpful to be reminded of the core factors that make all relationships prosper, especially coming from a pandemic where mental fatigue can help you questioning what you've known for certain previously. This book is handy to refer to, helpful to give to support to friends from afar. This one talks about the power of Date Smart to help you if you're in a committed relationship. Finding the right partner can be difficult, but even if you do, fostering and maintaining open communication and compromise is another challenge you face. I have a committed partner, but I felt like this book gave me a compassionate look at where our relationship could be improved and practical advice for applying the lessons to my life and relationship. Setting personal boundaries is a particular challenge for me and sometimes doesn't even feel like a priority. Dr. Manley clearly shows why it's vital to establish these boundaries and how both people in a relationship can benefit, making it easier to take the first steps on your own. It's a book I'll definitely read again and again as I slowly tackle each lesson and apply what I've learned. So, all great relationships are born on friendship, and that's the premise of Date Smart, being your friend first here, and then making the friend with those you want to have relationships with. Thank you.
Thank you, Carla, and thanks for all the helpful tips. This book is also can make a great gift for someone you know in the dating process. I bought it for my 40-year-old daughter, and it was very helpful. So, look at the next speaker there. I'd like to welcome Nadine Condon. She will present her memoir. You can hold it up. Confessions. Stories to Rock Your Soul. Great title. Nadine had an exciting life as a rock and roll festival director, followed by a career with hospice. Welcome, Nadine.
Does this one work also?
Yeah, we're
Yeah,
gonna try
I'd
it
rather have this one. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, first off, thank you. I read without my glasses, so I'll hook them on my Raider Super Bowl ring, which you can read about in this book. Also, this is my first time participating. I really wanted to thank Jean for encouraging me to be here. And my book is $20 to the general public and on Amazon, but I'd like to offer it today for $10 to any member of Redwood Writers Organization. Wow. I congratulate all of you that have written your books, because you know what it's like, and it's not easy.
That's very generous. Thank you.
So I'm reading from my introduction. A light coastal breeze caressed my damp, naked skin. I stood dripping on the cliffside deck under the glare of a full moon. Waves crashed noisily on the rocks far below as I surveyed the nighttime Pacific. Men and women mingled casually unclothed behind me, dipping in and out of the steamy hot baths. Joints were passed offhandedly. The smell of rotten eggs mixed sinuously with cheap incense and weed smoke. The only lights were votives, which sputtered occasionally in the rising mist. I reveled in how free I felt. The moors of my conservative upbringing had melted away. I was in the fabled bohemian enclave of Big Sur. This was the Esalen Institute, that famous retreat center and breeding ground of the human potential movement. It was 1971. I was a college student, originally from the South, camping with friends in the Big Sur redwoods. I had a transcendent moment of clarity there, peering out over the vastness of the ocean. The water seemed to gleam with possibility. It was simple. I wanted to live like these people. I knew right there and then, in a nanosecond, I would accomplish all this and more. The West Coast would beckon me until I gave in to her entreaties. There was a big life in front of me. I was completely positive about it. I've never ever forgotten how I felt that exalted evening and that sense of assuredness that enveloped me. That's how it started for me, traipsing into a future I could feel but not see. This was ground zero. That pivotal visit to that sulfurous sanctuary of human possibility was a kiss of recognition from the otherworldly frisson of knowingness. After a lifetime of wrestling with this enigma of palpable energy, I'm now comfortable calling these indelible moments of comprehension ones of the spirit. You might call it the divine, higher power, the source, God, the universe. The name doesn't matter. What does matter is acknowledgement of the sublime, supernal entity. It's that unerring instinct, insight, intuition that permeates our entire being. Impossible to explain and beyond logic. It's the deep gut feeling when we just know the right path, the right approach, the right action. I've come to understand this spirit as my one constant companion, offering guidance as I speed through my days. Once it warned me of grave danger and I ignored it to disastrous ends. On another occasion, it led me to a Super Bowl ring. That same spirit kept forcing me to keep re-meeting my husband until I took off my blinders and actually saw him. Sometimes I listened to it and thrived. My music career with the Jefferson Starship and Grace Slip comes to mind. Also my music festival, Nadine's Wild Weekend. But often I just didn't understand, and so bumbled around, running into the same obstacles over and over. These tales of my hedonistic, exciting rock and roll life and my unexpected journey into the hospice field as a late life career, my wrenching stories of loss and service, and my zigzag journey to and from faith are meant to inspire. I know from my own rough and tumble history, as confusing and stressful as life is, change is possible. We can step through our fears. We can mature spiritually. We can become aware, responsible adults. Or not. It's not for me to judge anyone's path or choices. These true life stories reflect my peripatetic adventures, good and bad, and the knowledge, or lack thereof, that was the result of these experiences. You will see yourself in some of these stories. My book represents universal, time-honored challenges. Who among us hasn't shied away from demanding situations, unwilling to listen to that small voice inside? Who else has been incapable of stepping through whatever forces hold us back? Who hasn't struggled with the God question? Whether you want to relive my wild rock and roll adventures vicariously, or glean greater insight into tangled yet more consequential matters, this book is for you.
Thank you, Nadine. And it sounds like a very exciting book, as I know that it is. And it's very nice of her to be so generous to us. So, look to your program. You will see Curtis Moran. Welcome, Curtis. He will present his coming-of-age novel, Lost and Found. Welcome, Curtis.
Even
Oh, glasses.
it all started with a mistake. I was on the F Muni, and the card inside lets me on the bus or on the streetcar, and this fell out of the backpack. And that inspired the trilogy, which is, of course, represented right here. My professor said, you know, after I completed 5 feature-length screenplays, you should make the trilogy, the last 3, into a novel. It's like, why shouldn't he have told me that in the first place? So, the readings, I'll give you a taste of all of that. It happened that the man who returned my wallet, a young man from the East Coast, was in search of his father in Berkeley. And I also met a real live person named Whiskey Bill. Not Bill, but Whiskey Bill. And he preferred to live in Golden Gate Park. Okay. So from the book, halfway across the United States, Ryan has lost his phone because it, like this, fell out of his backpack. And then in Denver, a guy steals his wallet from the same backpack. He wasn't being negligent, but he did lose all his money, save 20 bucks. So he's really furious.
Close to the mic.
Really furious. Oh, does that help? Okay. And yeah, he even says some bad words. So there's an older lady there, and she overhears this, and she says, trying to lighten things up, time and tide and the bus. Wait for no man. Well, he's trying to get the 11 o'clock bus, and he wanted to call his bank to say, my car's been stolen. Too late. Ryan charges out to the bus bays. There, another line of passengers awaits the driver. Eventually, at 11:10 a.m., according to the digital display, a new driver saunters out to his coach. The once cheerful lady gets in line behind the rest of those in a hurry. Ryan reclaims his former seat. With everyone on board, he sees he still has a vacant seat next to his own until the lady makes her way, reluctantly, to it. She says, sorry. Ryan looks uneasy and says nothing for a few moments. He moves his backpack to the floor. Cautiously, she takes the open seat. Frustrated, Ryan explains himself. My money, my wallet, my debit card, stolen right before my fucking eyes. Sorry. I know. I saw, kind of, after it happened. At first I thought they were your friends, but you're too clean cut. Except for your rough language. Ryan heaves a sigh of exhaustion. I'm on this stupid quest to meet my father. Now I don't even have his phone number. Taking her time, the woman assures him, the Lord will provide. Oh no, not one of those. Ryan braces himself, holds his breath, and fixes his gaze straight ahead, saying nothing. The woman leans back in her seat and just smiles to herself, closing her eyes peacefully. Ryan closes his eyes too, but forcefully. And my phone, he adds. If I can't call my bank, my savings could get hijacked too. You know, overdraft protection. Opening her eyes as though stirring from a pleasant afternoon nap, the woman looks over at Ryan. Would you like to use mine? Not waiting for him to answer, she digs into her purse and pulls out a new iPhone. My grandkid said I need it to stay in touch, or out of trouble. Seeing Ryan's surprise, she adds, you do know how to use one, don't you? You're awesome, thanks. Within less than a minute, he has contacted his bank and is listening to music on hold. Out of the corner of her eye, she notices him fidgeting. Don't worry about the time, Ryan smirks. Yes, I know, time and tide. He leans back with suppressed impatience, waiting his turn. When he looks out the window, he notices the magnificent Colorado Rocky Mountains for the first time. His mouth drops and his eyes widen. I need to report a stolen car. Hours later, and although weary from the day's ride, the passengers are more alert now. Ryan's traveling companion asks, do you have enough cash to tide you over? Extracting a single 20 and two $1 bills, he shrugs. This is it. Let's double that. I bet you have at least one person who's waiting for a call. Maybe someone you didn't get a proper goodbye. Ryan, still holding her phone, turns his face away from her as if an answer will come if he just listens to the strumming sound of the bus's wheels speeding towards Salt Lake City. The setting sun, red-orange, is turning the sky into copper and indigo. So make the call, Ryan. Looking away and out the window, giving Ryan his privacy, she reflects on recent events, smiling. The phone rings, then voicemail. Your digital Dan here. Talk to me. Dan, Ryan here, reporting in to tell you I'm on my way to California, and I'm on a borrowed phone. I hope it's okay to call you to thank you for your friendship and to tell you I'm sorry. Sorry about how I ran out on you. At another time, if you want, I'll tell you about my adventures. A short time later, at Salt Lake City Greyhound Depot, Ryan hugs the lady goodbye. What is your name? She does not answer. She simply smiles and nods farewell.
Well, Kurt, I know he just received his book in the mail. And it sounds terrific. And he is such a good script writer. I'm sure that it is. Thank you, Kurt. Okay, let's see where we are. Pamela Hecht. She will present her nonfiction children's book, Amazing Animals, Fun Facts for Kids. And Pam is amazing. She is multi-talented. She wrote the book and drew the beautiful characters. Welcome, Pam.
Shirt level, how's that? So Amazing Animals, Fun Facts for Kids started about 30-some years ago as an alphabet book for children and has since morphed into this nonfiction book for kids. The only thing it has in common with the alphabet book that it started as is the fact that there really are 26 animals, one for every letter of the alphabet. And I think it's only fair to start with the anteater, since he is kind of the poster boy for the book. Now, each animal has a whimsical poem that has something educational and some fun facts at the bottom, which truly are amazing. So the most impressive tongue I've seen is 2 feet long and very lean, invading anthills with a flick. There's no escaping. Ants stick. Now that tongue flicks in and out 150 to 160 times per minute, and so he can eat up to 35,000 insects per day. But to ensure the future supply of food, the anteater never devours the entire nest. So we have an environmentalist. The crocodile. Do not befriend the crocodile. Beware that charming toothy smile. Please don't feel sad if crocs shed tears. They're just digesting food, my dears. And it's true, crocodiles do shed tears, but they're not crying. When they eat, they swallow air, which stimulates the gland that makes tears. And so that's where the saying comes from about crying crocodile tears. The next animal is the most dangerous animal in all of Africa. Does anyone know who that is?
Lion.
No, the hippo. Although I did not mention that in the fun facts. Yeah. So hippos basking in the mud sweat what looks like drops of blood. Relax. No need to be alarmed. It's hippo sunscreen. They're not harmed. So hippos spend about 16 hours a day in the water, but they do love to sunbathe on the riverbanks. And so to protect their sensitive skin from that hot African sun, the skin actually secretes this sort of oily red substance, which is a moisturizing sunblock. Now, some people think that hippos are great swimmers. The actual fact is that they cannot swim at all. They just trot along the bottom of the river. Now, I would have to bring up the lion, because after all, who is the king of beasts? So the king of beasts is very proud to have a roar so super loud. But lion napping leaves no doubt that roaring wears a lion out. And lions truly are the most lazy of all the big cats. They rest for 16 to 20 hours per day. The male lion's roar can be heard for 5 miles, and it is louder than 25 gas-powered lawnmowers. I don't know who does this research, but I read it in books. It must be true. Now, the moose is the only animal that got a 2-page spread, and there are 2. There's a moose here, there's 2 geese, and there's 2 cabooses. Why? Well, this is why. 1 goose is goose, but 2 is geese. 1 moose is moose, but 2 is meese? Or is it more like 2 cabooses? If that is so, it must be mooses. Goose, geese, gooses, moose, meese, mooses? Can anyone tell me what 2 moose is? Now, you are all intelligent adults, so you know that 2 moose is moose. But what you might not know is that the male moose, the bull moose, when he has his antlers on, they act like large hearing aids, and his hearing is magnified by 19%. Again, I don't know who did that research, but I believe. I thought we ought to have a snake in here, so I picked the python. And pythons never chew their food. To swallow whole is very rude. When meals are eaten with such zest, they can't be easy to digest. And they're not. The snake does swallow the food whole, usually head first. And the bigger the meal, the longer it takes to digest. So the snake only eats about 5 or 6 times per year. I think we have time for maybe one more. I'm going to do the vulture. It's the only bird in the book, and one that's much maligned. So the vulture is kind of Mother Nature's garbage man. A flattened squirrel, a squished raccoon. Oh, it's sad they had to die so soon. But each becomes a tasty treat that hungry vultures love to eat. Now, you might not know that a group of vultures on the ground is called a committee, or a venue, or a volt. But when they're flying, they're called a kettle. And when they're feeding together on the ground, they're called a wake. And I think that's pretty appropriate, don't you? Now, of course, the last animal in the book is the zebra. And right next to the zebra, there are 2 pages. There's a glossary for kids, so all those words in there that were educational that they might not know are all explained back there. And the very last thing in the book is an interactive section for kids. It says, what's your favorite animal? And there's room there for the children to draw an animal, maybe do a little research, write a poem.
Thank you, Pam. I think that would make a terrific present. Unless you want to read yourself a bedtime story. Our next wonderful author, he actually is a teacher at the Santa Rosa Junior College and has handpicked 9 wonderful poems. His anthology is called Moonlight and Reflections. Welcome, Steve Trenum.
Thank you. I have never had to follow an anteater's tongue before.
Go closer to the mic, Steve. Closer to the mic. Yeah.
Is that better?
Much better.
Okay. It wasn't 9 poems, but 9 poets in the anthology. So there are not 9 long.
Excuse me, 9 poets.
Thank you. My first poem. Did somebody forget their glasses? Thank you. My first poem is called Stream of Consciousness. A freshwater stream hidden in the ocean is thought to hold trout larger than the one that got away. No one knows its depths or what keeps the ocean at bay, but its water is sweet and pure, free of hooks and lures. And although sailors have caught glimpses of it streaming beneath their hulls I can only dream about the sanctity of trout in utero, rolled up in ocean quilts, as I walk along this impoverished shore, tasting salt. Thank you. I wasn't going to say anything about this next poem, but I think I will. Three well-known women writers, who you should know by their first name, who committed suicide way before their time. It's called Transients. The leaves are falling, and I long to feel them hit the ground. I am Sylvia. I am Virginia. I am Anne. I am a fly dancing on a window pane, struggling to get through to a spider and her web. I live in the instant between a small fish and the egret's beak. I am a skylark trying to sing in a coal mine. My life ends here. It ends with my head in an oven. It ends at the bottom of a river. It ends in an exhaust-filled car. My words on the page go on without me. And my last poem, a poet friend of mine said I shouldn't read a poem about my mother before an audience. And I told her, I haven't written any poems about my mother before an audience. But I'm going to take her advice anyway, and I'm going to read a poem about my grandmother. It's called Magic. When I was 8 years old, I would ride my bike to my grandmother's small house on the corner of 4th and G. Once there, I was expected to pull weeds out of Nana's lawn, which was mostly Bermuda grass. When I had worked all morning, I got stung by a bee, and Nana made a poultice out of witch hazel and dirt. She said, "That's enough for today, Stephen. Come in and I'll show you some magic." We walked through her house into the kitchen where she had set on her black and white tile counter a deep conical yellow bowl with a long-handled wooden spoon lying next to it. The bowl was filled with cream. "Now, Stephen, as a reward for your hard work, I'm going to let you use my magic spoon to turn this bowl of plain milk into the best butter you ever tasted." She showed me how to use the spoon, and I began beating the cream, waiting for the magic to happen. It did not happen quickly. I told Nana my arm was going to fall off. She said, "Not all magic happens with a wave of a wand. Keep beating." Gradually, the cream began to thicken. The spoon and I were one. We were turning plain milk into butter. Nana lifted 2 lids off the fire in her Wedgwood stove and placed slices of freshly baked bread over the holes. When the toast was ready, she gave me her mother's silver knife to spread the butter. She then opened a jar of point-raised huckleberry jam she had made that summer. We sat on the front porch steps and savored the fruits of our labor. Magic. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve, for collecting those poems to share with us. I would like to introduce you to Sean Langwell, past president of Redwood Writers. He has written quite a book. It is called 10 Seconds of Boldness. It is his non-fiction self-help book. Welcome,
wrote this book because I don't want to die with any regrets. Regret for all the things I wish I would have done but never truly believed I could. Regret that I believed the lies of my inner critics, who incessantly questioned my credibility because I don't have 3 or 4 letters at the end of my name. That decades of experience overcoming challenges of all kinds did not qualify me to discuss the value of courage and confidence. Regret that I was so afraid of failing that I never found the courage to try. That's from Why This Book Now.
Closer to the mic. Closer. A little closer.
Can you hear me now?
You've got such a nice
On Roman numeral 21. So what is this book? 10 Seconds of Boldness outlines a simple yet transformational 5-step method to move you from where you are to where you want to be in a way that is purposeful, meaningful, and lasting. That's it in a nutshell. We're going to jump right into it, and we've got 3.5 minutes, maybe 4. So I am going to read an excerpt from pages 79 to 82 entitled Chapter 6, Bridging the Confidence Gap. It's not what you think you are that holds you back. It's what you think you are not. Dennis Waitley. For Father's Day in 2021, my son treated me to a zipline tour. For 2.5 hours, we traversed the treetops across 7 zip lines and 2 sky bridges. The only things that separated us from the forest floor 250 feet below were a harness with pulleys, a 3/8-inch cable, and the courage to let go. It was the most exhilarating Father's Day ever. Though I was anxious at the first 2 steps, I relaxed by the 3rd, found my legs, so to speak, until we approached a 100-foot-long, wobbly sky bridge made of ropes and planks. I stared at it, and then it ground. My knees began to shake. Unlike the zip lines, which meant harnessing up and letting go to enjoy the ride, to continue our adventure meant I had to put one foot in front of the other and cross that rickety bridge 75 feet above the ground below. I watched as others crossed first and realized it wasn't impossible. I grabbed the rope rails, and after finding my balance, found it was not as scary as I thought. I took a few steps, then skipped the rest of the way across that rickety bridge. When I got to the other side, my son asked, "Dad, what was that all about?" I decided to have fun because I knew it was safe. Your confidence gap is not as big as you may think. The bridge between where you are and where you want to be is shorter than you think. In fact, for most people, it's only 6 to 7 inches, the average space between your ears. The bridge between where you are and when you, I already mentioned that. The goal of this chapter is really to inspire you to take the next step forward to help you bridge your confidence gap. See, when I have too many projects, goals, and to-dos going on at the same time, I can easily get scattered and lose focus. They all seem important, but whenever I look at them all at once, I get overwhelmed. It's like an overstuffed garage or closet, or a home office with disorganized drawers, boxes of notes, and yes, even file drawers bursting with old utility bills, notebooks, etc. Anybody relate? Eventually, the clutter of my environment and my mind becomes so great that I feel ineffective. And to regain focus, I take time to organize and declutter. When I finally decide to tackle big projects, organizing or otherwise, I do it one drawer, one closet, one room at a time. I focus on making progress in one area before moving on to the next. I don't obsess over results. I strive to maintain a healthy balance between work and relaxation, remembering to also take time out to celebrate my accomplishments, small and large. This process has become a set routine or habit, just like making my bed in the morning. The book has several different prompts in there so that you can actually work through these. This is prompt number 1 from chapter 6. Make your bed and take out the trash. It's important to pay attention to unresolved problems or unfulfilled ambitions you have and how you typically respond to them. Watch for procrastination, denial, blame, avoidance,
guilt, fear. You can do this now because you got a couple of minutes. But choose one area, skill, attitude, or belief that's been bugging you or you have been procrastinating over, and make a decision to do something about it as soon as you finish this chapter. It can be anything: making your bed, taking out the trash, starting a load of laundry, anything. The key is to not just think about it, right? But to actually do it. Decide what it is, then make a plan, write it down, set a date, and get started. That's how it's done. As you apply the skills you learn in the book, it will become readily apparent how easy it is to transfer them to other areas, essentially building your confidence, one closet, one room at a time. The cure to overcoming any and all of the above is simple. Be bold, practice the 5 steps, decide, commit, and let it go now.
Thank you, John, for writing this very practical book. I would like to welcome Tanisha Bernal. She will present a children's board book. It's pretty original. It's called Little Chef's First 100 Words. Pretty amazing. She wrote the book and graphically designed it. Welcome, Tanisha.
So, Little Chef's First 100 Words introduces babies and toddlers to items found in the kitchen, from a bowl to a zester. Each page is filled with familiar and out of the ordinary kitchen tools. And before I start reading from this, I wrote and illustrated this book because of that little boy back there, who's 3 now. I could not find a book like this on the marketplace when he was 1, and that shocked me because, hi bud, because I grew up in the kitchen from his age. He's 3, and I would bake cookies all year round with my cookie grandma. That name stuck with her from the time I was 3 until the day she passed away. Kids should be in the kitchen. There's so much to learn. It doesn't have to just be a scary place. My son is 3. He knows not to touch the oven. He knows not to touch the stove, but he can add. He can do the measurements with the tablespoon and teaspoon. He knows how to whisk. He knows not to put the whisk too high above the bowl or you make a mess. And if I don't feel like baking like extravagantly, we're gonna sit on the floor with a boxed cake mix. Say that 5 times fast. And if it gets messy on the floor, it's on the floor. Kids should be in the kitchen. So here's Little Chef's First 100 Words. I'm going to take you back to your childhood. Welcome to the kitchen. Kitchens are filled with different things. Let's see what we can find. I'm sure many of us have a coffee maker. My son has to, he prefers waffles every day out of the waffle maker. He's lucky he got that today. We have maybe an egg steamer. Okay. Stand mixer. Then you have tableware. You'll need these to eat your yummy meal, like a fork, a spoon, and a knife. But maybe you have a tea set or a fruit bowl, and maybe you put your hot cocoa or mommy's coffee in a mug. Or you may have a butter dish, so to keep those little sticky fingers out of the butter. Then you have food preparation. These items will help you before you start cooking or baking. My son was diagnosed really young with autism, and the blender, too loud for him. So we eased into it. I'd count down 3, 2, 1 with the blender, so he knows it's about to come on, and he would slowly inch his way into the kitchen, and now we do a dance with the blender. You can have your cutting board. He has his own with his own set of knives that cut perfectly. He's a good sous chef, I must say. You have your food processor to chop, chop, chop. Your mixing bowls to, as Diego says, mixa, mixa, mixa. Or maybe you have a hand mixer or an apple cutter. Then you have your kitchen tools. These will help you as you are cooking or baking, like a timer, a measuring cup, or Diego's favorite, a pizza cutter, because he loves pizza. And my favorite, ice cream scoop, because ice cream is my favorite food. Cookware and cooking utensils. You have a pressure cooker, 2 different types of spatulas. This is an argument between couples, I have found out. As what is considered a spatula. International cookware. This page, or this spread, was so important to me when I got picked up by my editor at Random House, because I said this cannot be pushed to the end of the book. Stereotypically, it would. You don't see it by looking at me. I am multiracial. My son is multiracial. We have these things in our kitchen. We have a mortar and pestle or a molcajete. We have a, I wish we had the tamale steamer. My mother-in-law has one. We have a rice cooker. We have a comal that we use daily to roast our peppers and heat our tortillas on. So it was very important that this was not in the back of the book, and thankfully it was not. Ready to bake? Here are some things that can lend a helping hand. You got your muffin tins, your cookie cutters, how to do a little cookie cutter in the shape of a truck for my son. And last but not least, cleaning and storage. A good way to introduce your little ones into the kitchen if you're not sure about the oven and stove yet. You can fill your fridge with all your goodies, dishwasher, brush and dust, or broom and dustpan, and you gotta put the cookies away in the cookie jar. So when you're done with your meal, these items will help you clean your kitchen and keep everything organized.
What a beautiful educational book for a young child. Quite impressive. Thank you. I would like to introduce Simona Carini. She will present her poetry book, Survival Time. Welcome, Simona.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thanks for having me. And I'm a food writer, so I think it's good that I come after. That's how I started, as a food writer. But the book is my first poetry collection, and Survival Time is a quote from the first poem, which I will read. And the cover, the photo on the cover, I took that photo. And it's also from the title, from the first poem, so you'll hear about what it is. Lurdle Tunnel. Bare rock overhead presses on both sides for 20 minutes deep inside this Norwegian mountain. I travel, hold on to the sense of forward motion. This is happening to us, not only to me, you said. I inhaled deeply from a place where my fears lodged of seeing you in pain, ceasing to breathe, to relish life with me. Only the tunnel and no laughing. We accepted smiles when thanking white coats for bad news. Meta, chemo, radio, full terms truncated, tamed. At the beginning, familiar words sounded stilted. How did you sleep? An evasion. Would you like some fish for dinner? Insensitive. But we still wanted to talk, go for a walk, not into exile from each other. 5 minutes in, the ceiling rises, the walls recede as if the tunnel is breathing in, and the air turns blue, soft and brilliant. A deep pool in sunlight. Deeper into the mountain, dark again. When you have cancer, your life is called survival time. Time scale changes. from years to months, birthdays, anniversaries erased from the calendar. Instead, blood tests, scans, visits, drug refills. The tunnel expands into a blue hall again. Yellow light peeks from the floor, hinting at sunrise. Azure washes my face like diving into the Caribbean Sea looking for my favorite damselfish, blue with stars on its body. We've learned to discuss your bike rides, my riding, the ocean, details that define us, not birthdays or anniversaries, but the days at home, dancing around the stove, car trips with the cats, nights in our bed, staring in silence at the new moon. My next poem, I grew up, so I'm Italian, I grew up very close to Assisi, and St. Francis is very important in my life. So the next poem is my homage to St. Francis. Addendum to the Canticle of the Creatures, written on the California North Coast. From a blue so deep, the sky burns in envy, to a gentle gray, a shade darker than the compact clouds above. Every few hours, you don a different dress, striped or solid, white-laced or embroidered by emerging sea stacks. Rolling in pianissimo or raging to shore, your best as mirror to my internal churn. I write edgy footprints at your door, the tide takes them. You are worst when your hypnotic motion lures. Waves crawl ashore, slide back, encore, then slaps me with cold water. If fog shrouds you, your roar lets me know you are there. Unless I hear you, how can I be sure of anything? Praise be you, brother ocean. You fill me, no other so close to me.
Thank you, Simona, for sharing with us your poems of light and dark. Welcome our next reader, Neil Bergenstaller. I was hoping you would correct me. He will present his children's book, which is fiction, called A Trip Through Time. Welcome, Neil.
Before I begin, first of all, can you hear me? Good. Before I begin, I'm going to read what's written on the bookmark as to what this book is about. The Trip Through Time. Imagine what it's like to meet these people that you've learned in history and in English literature while you were in school. Would you not tell your friends and your neighbors about all this? Maybe even ask for their autographs as well. And then also along the short stories, some of them about an elephant full of curiosity, a mouse who stayed bitter. The one I'll be reading about is about a wolf who wanted sheep for supper but had a problem. The boy who liked animals so much, a lonesome Manx cat, and Manx is a tailless cat, and a grasshopper loyal to his old friend to the very end. So the one I'll be reading about is entitled The Wolf That Almost Tricked the Shepherd. A wolf lived in a cave near a flock of sheep, which was his favorite food. The flock was watched carefully by a shepherd and a large sheepdog, but the wolf was very determined to have sheep for his dinner. The shepherd would not be a problem for me, but I am afraid of his dog, thought the wolf as he watched the herd from afar. He pondered and pondered on how he could get to the sheep until he had an idea how he could fool the shepherd and the dog. He remembered being dressed as a farmer at his friend's masquerade party not long ago. Yes, that just might work, he thought. He looked in the big trunk and found what he needed. He put on a farmer's clothes and a human mask, which looked quite real, over his head, and a farmer's hat. To cover his front and his back paws, he wore some gloves and a pair of shoes. Looking very much like a farmer, the wolf said to himself, "That should fool the dog as well as the shepherd." The wolf then carried a shotgun with him. And see if you can figure out why he's taking the shotgun with him as I read further. The disguised wolf approached the shepherd, sounding quite friendly. The wolf stated, "My friend, I know how important it is to have a dog to help you look after your sheep, but I have some good news. Earlier today, I shot the wolves who were after my chickens. You see, I own a farm not too far away. So anyway, with no wolves at all in this region, why have a dog to guard your sheep? Perhaps you should take your dog home. I'll stay here and look after your sheep while you are gone." "Sure, no problem," replied the shepherd, sensing that the farmer was quite truthful because the farmer had the shotgun with him. As the shepherd took the sheepdog home, the wolf removed his hat and the human mask. He thought, "That did it. Now I'll be having sheep for supper." Delighted, he tried to take some of the sheep home. But the shepherd finally returned just in time to see what was happening. He discovered that the quote-unquote farmer was in fact the wolf wearing farmer's clothes. He also thought, "Why did I not hear any gunshots, even a distance away, if the wolves had been shot earlier today, as the farmer said?" So he sensed that the wolf has tricked him, hurried home to get his dog. When they returned to the sheep field, the dog protected the herd and attacked the wolf. Since the wolf could neither fight nor escape, he ended up losing his life. The end.
Neil's short stories all have very valuable life themes for children. I'd like to welcome and Rod will be our last author until our break. But I just better say this in case you're going to start bolting out. I would like to ask you to have a very nice break, but to please return in respect for our remaining 10 authors. I would like to introduce Rod Morgan. He wrote a detective crime novel, A Wicked Web.
It's not quite a novel, but it's definitely a crime story of comeuppance. It involves a detective at the end of his career, and he becomes involved in an attempted cover-up and must decide whether to stay quiet and retire peacefully or listen to his conscience and blow up the whole thing. So I've chosen several paragraphs to read, kind of like a movie trailer that kind of gives you an idea of what goes on here. Meanwhile, in the squad room of the downtown precinct, Harry Dietrich, the detective in charge, grimaced with disgust as he listened to the DA continue to gloat on TV. The ever self-promoting Adams was ambitiously announcing his intention to run for Congress. "Arrogant bastard," Dietrich mumbled as he signed his report and closed the file on Sam Winston. Dietrich and Adams had a bad case of mutual scorn. His aversion for the DA had festered for a decade. In fact, there was a deep underlying loathing smoldering between them. Closing the file drawer with a little extra gusto, he could no longer stand to hear Adams drone on about truth, justice, and the fight for right. It burned him around the edges that Adams was about to be rewarded with praise, success, and advancement again. The DA's office was a madhouse. Dan Adams was seething. His perfect little victory now had a gaping wound that was sure to create a big ugly scar. I want these loose ends fixed and fixed now. He turned to scream at Chapman. I want to know how this could happen, and I want to know who exactly is to blame. Chapman turned and yelled at Dietrich, get Steve Owens in here now. Dietrich always enjoyed Adams' angry fits, and this one was a doozy. It had it all. Red face, bulging veins, crazed eyes, and a raging diatribe. He could only nod over and over, all while he struggled to stifle a chuckle. When Adams turned and directed his verbal barrage toward the window, Dietrich slipped out of the room. He felt a little pang of guilt at enjoying the DA's language, but it didn't last long. Even as a veteran cop, the morgue continued to give Dietrich the creeps. He paused at the entrance to observe the nameplate on the door, Mike Erickson, medical examiner. He had never quite understood how anyone could find such fascination working with dead bodies. Besides, it just smelled too clean and sterile, and the lights were too bright. As much as he hated the morgue, he equally loved the forensic lab. He didn't fully understand the technical science, but he liked having the facts explained to him. Well, truth be told, it helped that it was Linda Lewis doing the explaining. Back in the DA's office with Adams and Chapman, Dietrich began his debriefing. This case has too many unknowns and I don't like it. Dietrich's statement fell on deaf ears. Adams glowered at him. 3 people got in, 3 bodies came out. Chapman concurred. Cut and dried, end of story. A positive idea isn't necessary. Dietrich realized that all they wanted was for the whole ugly affair to be wrapped up. He sensed that for Adams, the future was of more concern. The report is filed and the case closed, Adam barked, and don't ever leave this office again until you are excused. Yes, sir, is what Dietrich said out loud, but screw you is what went through his mind. Back at his desk, he pondered the consequences of his intentions. Orders be damned. This is one case that will not be swept under the rug. He picked up the phone and reached out to his old friend Paul Ennis and Mike Erickson. The text message to both was short and simple. Meet me at McKintrick's Pub, 8 o'clock. The beers are on me.
I love Rod's humor in his little novelette. So we're going to have cake, and we have water and coffee. It's a congratulations author cake. Please go around, visit the authors, ask questions, and buy an autographed book, and be back in 20 minutes. Thank you. Hey, we've got 10 more authors. Remember, they only have 5 minutes, so it makes for a very exciting event. I would like to introduce Tommy Whitener, who will present his fiction, The Circassian Beauty. Tommy Whitener, who is also a valuable board member. Welcome, Tommy.
Oh, man.
Look at this.
He's not done yet.
Tommy.
Oh, he's not
Oh,
done
yeah.
yet.
Tommy, turn to me.
Good afternoon. I'm going to read to you from my last novel, The Circassian Beauty.
Closer to the mic, Tommy.
Garipov unsteadily made his way to where he could stand, looking down as Pavel and said, I haven't forgotten, Orlov. and now I want satisfaction. Satisfaction? What are you talking about? That woman was mine, and I haven't forgotten. That woman was just a cheap gypsy whore. Those kinds of women are a kopeck a dozen. She's dead now, but that woman was my wife. Realizing that the Chechnyan was not to be dismissed, Pavel slowly rose to his feet and looked at the man. Well, I'll be a monkey's uncle, he thought. That poor bastard married that wench. Surely we don't have to fight a duel over her. Seeing as how she was your wife, Pavel said, I apologize. How's that? You have my apology. So can we forget about satisfaction? Besides, you know duels are illegal. I've been waiting for this moment for years, and I won't be denied now. Fuck you and the Tsar's laws. Pistols or swords. Pavel thought about how stupid duels were, and how many good men had been killed or seriously wounded fighting them, and about the Tsar's new prohibition against them. Then he thought about his honor and his reputation, and he said, challenge accepted. I choose pistols. Name your second. Mine will be Lieutenant Uliski, and mine Lieutenant Semenov. Garipov glowered back. To himself, Pavel said, I'll never understand how that Muslim devil got in the Russian army anyway. Everyone knows those heathens can't be trusted. Whoever convinced the Tsar to let them serve should be shot. And whoever convinced him to let them become officers should be tortured and shot. Several days later, the sun was still clearing the horizon when the duelists and their seconds gathered in the clearing in the woods, several versts from the fort. Pavel and Garipov had removed their tunics and were standing bareheaded in their shirt sleeves when Garipov's second approached them with a lacquered box. Inside was a brace of identical dueling pistols. Having been challenged, Pavel had first choice. He took one pistol, Garipov took the other. The seconds had chosen the firing distance at 20 paces, far enough so that a hit was not assured, but close enough so that it was likely. The men positioned themselves back to back, raised their pistols, and on signal by Pavel's second, began stepping forward. Pavel's second called out the steps, and when he reached 10, he stepped back, watched the duelists turn and aim at each other. Pavel was the first to fire. However, just before pulling the trigger, he dramatically raised his arm into the air and sent the deadly charge flying over the trees. Then he stood waiting for Garipov's response. Even the big Chechnyan's flowing mustache didn't conceal the transformation of his mouth from a tight-lipped snarl into a broad smile. Grinning, he refined his aim at Pavel, drawing an assured bead on the exact spot where the ruffles on Pavel's sparkling white shirt covered his heart. Unflinching and with a deadly hand, Garipov allowed long seconds to pass and then slowly raised his pistol well above Pavel's head, and he fired in the air. Riding back to the fort, his second said to Pavel, "That was a very brave thing you did. He could have killed you. But what I don't understand is why you said all those bad things about him if you knew you weren't going to shoot him. You know, Nikita, I didn't know I was going to shoot in the air. I was just standing there waiting to be killed or be killed, and through my mind flashed an image of that woman in the pharmacy. And I thought, what a stupid thing it would be to die and never see her again. But even if you fired in the air, you didn't know that he would. No, but a man can only control his own actions. I suddenly knew that I wasn't going to be part of any killing today. I really didn't think of Garipov. His actions and destiny are his own, and fortunately for me, he didn't kill me." The men rode on in silence for a while, and until Lieutenant Uliski finally said, "Pavel, tell me about this woman at the pharmacy. She must be something." "Yes, she is, Nikita. She certainly is." Spasiba.
You gotta love Tommy's sense of humor. And you look fabulous.
Yes.
welcome Dr. John Jackson. He will present his memoir, mostly in his own words. Welcome, John.
Thank you very much. This is a memoir of my father's life, who was born in the 20s, grew up in the 1930s, dead center in Kansas, dirt poor, barefoot in the summers because they didn't have money for shoes, no electricity, no running water, and yet they farmed and raised animals, and he tells the story of that in this book. It's based on a number of cassette recordings that he made in the year or two before he died, which I got from my sister. And then I researched the family history, researched a lot of the people and the events in the book, and it's all in the book. It was a present from my sister, who didn't know that I was doing it. So I'd like to read a couple of passages from it. He says, I was born on August 9th, 1926, in Hutchinson, Kansas. It's not unusual for most people to know very little about their parents, much less their ancestors. But when you look back, how do you separate out what people told you and what you thought you heard? But one thing I do remember is that we lived on a farm. I don't recall the cement tank, but evidently it was a pretty big one that the cattle came down to drink from. It had a fairly wide cement rim around the top. I used to crawl up on that when I was probably 3 or 4 years old, and I walked around it. Of course, my grandmother, whom I'll talk about later, was scared to death that I would fall into the tank and that no one would see it when it happened. Unbeknownst to me, my oldest uncle, Lloyd Diggs, who was attending McPherson College at the time, came home for a break. He was going to be in a play at college, and he was going to dress up in a horribly scary costume. So he put it on, and he went out and hid behind the tank. And sure enough, when I went and crawled up on the cement area and started walking around the tank, he jumped out and yelled at me. He said, I'm the old man that lives in the tank. And that scared me to death. I went screaming to my grandmother in the house, and it did stop me from walking on the top of the tank. However, that is not the end of the story. Later, we went to McPherson College, and I do remember this. We were in the audience watching that play that they were putting on, and at some point, my uncle came out on stage in that costume, and I yelled out. I screamed in the midst of the audience, that's the old man who lives in the tank! And of course it brought the house down, and everybody roared with laughter, even though they didn't know what it was all about. Well, my dad never met his father. It's an interesting story. He was a transient worker that came through to harvest the wheat. And we'll hear the story now of my pregnant grandmother escaping from him. Again, I didn't get this information from my mother, but rather from my aunt. My dad didn't treat my mother very well. In fact, I think he physically abused her. What my aunt told me was that he was a soldier in World War I and went over to Europe to fight and came back with a piece of shrapnel in his head. And apparently this caused mental problems that made him upset, and he was difficult to get along with sometimes. The other thing was that he had a gun that he kept with him every minute and even slept with it under his pillow. He told my mother that if she ever tried to get away from him, that he would shoot her. Well, she was scared to death, and yet there was nothing she could do. And then she got pregnant. I don't know how far along she was, but she was pregnant with me. So one night, after he went to bed, maybe he'd been drinking, I don't know, but he was sleeping pretty heavily, and she decided that she was going to get away. She took off in the middle of the night and started running across the farm, trying to get to the nearest neighbor. Neighbors in those days could have been a quarter of a mile away, half a mile, or a mile away. I don't know how far it was, or how close she was to getting there, but she saw the headlights of his truck coming after her. She was scared to death, so she laid down in a plow furrow, a kind of ditch in the field, and just clung as closely as she could to the earth itself. And he missed finding her. When he was gone, she got to the neighbors and they took her home to her parents. Later, I was born in a hospital, which was unusual in those days, because most kids were born at home. The doctor came out and delivered you at the place where your mother lived. And so that is the beginning of my life. So he was raised as the youngest child of this large farm family, the Diggs family. And until he was a well-grown adult and out in the world, he thought that his mother was his older sister. And that all of his uncles and aunts were his brothers and sisters, and it was a big shock when he discovered that. So here's this man who grew up dirt poor, was educated in a one-room schoolhouse, who goes on to get his PhD in educational administration. He completely revamps the educational system in the brand new state of Hawaii, and then he gets involved in the international stage in educational administration, Russia, Northern Europe, and Saudi Arabia. So, my father's memoir.
A interesting book for all of us to look at. I would like to welcome Dana Rodney. She will present her climate fiction. We don't hear that genre very often. It is called The Last Polar Bear.
Well, hello everybody, and welcome, and thank you for being here. Wouldn't be any fun without you. I do want to thank all the volunteers who put this event on to allow us to come up here and do our favorite thing, talk about our books. My name is Dana Rodney. This is my book, The Last Polar Bear. It is climate fiction. Some people call it cli-fi. Some people say that sounds kinky. But it's not, I assure you. I found out just this week that the book won 3rd place in the San Francisco Keats Literary Competition. So I'm going to give you my elevator pitch for my book, if I can remember it. The book is part wildlife thriller, part nature documentary, and it is the near future story of the Arctic's last polar bear and the Inuit woman who tries to save it. I'm going to read the first part of the book where our polar bear main character is swimming in the Beaufort Sea in northern Alaska in the year 2040. She was desperate to stop swimming, but there was nowhere to stop, nothing to grab onto. She was frantic to spot the humped form of a spotted seal against its usual backdrop of ice, but the ice had not formed this year. A cramp shuddered through her massive shoulders. Her muscles would seize up soon, she could tell. She chuffed, a steamy pant of breath which instantly froze into ice crystals around her snout. At the horizon, she spotted a gray line darker than the monotonous glare that had confronted her since morning. She lifted her head an inch higher. The gray form stabilized, coalesced. Land, finally. Her eyes angled behind her for any sign of her cub, the one she thought of as Chuka, because of the funny sneezing sound he made when something pleased him. But glancing over one shoulder, then the other, she saw no brave white snout reaching above the choppy waves. He'd whined and youled behind her for hours as they swam into the sharp yellow sunrise earlier that day. She could do nothing but swim on. She'd hoped he had dutifully quieted down, but the merciless waters must have pulled him under and silenced him. She dipped her snout into the freezing water to snap her thoughts back to the present, then blew off the droplets with a harsh blast. Survival was paramount. But she let out a crooning wail into the frigid air before she realized what she was doing. Maybe the tide had swept him ashore and he could hear her voice calling faintly in the frozen air. Or find her by scampering along the shoreline, following her scent for miles. But it was unlikely. She wailed again, not just for him, but for herself, an angle toward the spit of land. Her exhausted limbs dangled in the waves as the tide pushed her ashore. Clawing onto the stones, she snorted in frustration. The pull of gravity on her 500-pound body pressed down on her like a boulder. She pulled her paws beside her head and let her eyelids collapse. Rest. Finally, rest. But only 10 slowing exhalations passed before a distant scent tickled her nose and her eyes snapped open again. The hollow hairs at the back of her neck lifted in unison. A rancid, oily, slightly metallic scent. The humans were near. Thank you.
Well, Dana, thank you for introducing us to a new genre. I would like to welcome one of my favorite authors. I just said one. Mario Del Olio. He will present his memoir, Letters from Italy. I really enjoyed this book.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for having us here. In 1949, a young Italian immigrant in New York received a letter from his brother back in Italy. In that letter was a photograph announcing the engagement of my uncle to this young woman. In that photograph was another young woman, my mother. My father immediately fell in love with that beautiful photograph and asked if he could write to her. Wow. This young 18-year-old girl said, absolutely not. And then she relented. Given their long-anticipated encounter, this is after 2 years of letter writing, Orazio and Nicoletta decided that if their feelings were as strong upon meeting, that they would marry. If not, they would part as friends. There was a great deal resting on their first meeting. Orazio, though confident in his love for Nicoletta, was extremely anxious. He hoped she would see how deeply he wanted to take care of her and provide her with the best life he possibly could. Through their letters, he could tell she was more educated than he, and although he felt intimidated after reading her first letters, he opened his heart to her. In return, Nicoletta expressed her profound desire to be with him. The photo that had brought them together showed her beauty, but those letters from Italy revealed her heart. He was confident that they were meant to be together. The train ride from Paris seemed to take forever, but he was on his way to Bisceglie. Orazio had traveled by ship from New York to France, and he had been on the train for over 21 hours. It was only 6 a.m. when he arrived. He knocked gently on the door, but no one seemed to stir. He knocked again with more authority, and he heard a woman's voice cautiously ask, "Qui est? Who is it?" He was sure he woke her up. How could he be so foolish? He should have stayed at his brother's house until it was a reasonable hour. But he was so excited. He just had to see her as soon as possible. "Sono Orazio dall'America." "It's Orazio from America. I just arrived moments ago." "Si, Orazio." "Just a moment. I'll be right there." Antonietta grabbed her house dress and slipped it on. She poked her head into Nicoletta's room. "Nicoletta, wake up! Orazio is here." "What? He can't be. It's much too early." "Quickly, Nicoletta, fix your hair. I'll let him in. I look terrible. I can't let him see me like this." "You've been waiting 2 years, cara. What does it matter that you have sleep in your eyes? You have love in your heart." Everything was happening so quickly. Nicoletta was still trying to shake her mind from her slumber. She would have liked to have run a brush through her hair, but there was no time. She could hear him coming, so she pinched her cheeks to make them red and ran her fingers through her hair. "Can't believe he's here at last. I hope he thinks I'm pretty." As excited as she was, Nicoletta could not bring herself to get out of bed. She sat up and quietly listened through the door. She straightened the covers just as the door opened. There he was, in the flesh. Her heart was bursting. He was more handsome in person than in his pictures. He crossed the room in 3 steps and leaned down. Their first kiss was pure and chaste, but filled with untapped passion. Orazio sat on the bed beside Nicoletta. There was so much he wanted to say, but the words wouldn't come. The eloquence of their letters rendered them mute in person. "You look beautiful, Nicoletta. I can't believe I'm sitting here beside you." "Oh, Orazio, I look terrible. I didn't even get to fix my hair." "Not to me, my love. At this moment, you are the most beautiful girl in the world."
His book has just been translated into Italian. Okay, William, but I know him as Bill Hagwood. He will present his historical fiction. It's got quite an interesting name. Escape of the Alien War Babies. Welcome, Bill.
Thank you, and I just want to correct the title. It's the Alienated War Babies. How many war babies do we have? We are dying out.
I said corrected.
Well, Mario, it was just a beautiful story of arrival, and unfortunately, I have to break the mood with a story of departure, set in the San Francisco Bay Area during the late 1960s. Escape of the Alienated War Babies depicts a time of resistance and rebellion through the experiences of 9 men and women embedded in the social and cultural uprising now recalled as the counterculture. One of these characters is a Black Panther named Larry, whose father, a Methodist minister, derides his younger son's radical politics while praising Larry's brother, who joined the army and is serving in Vietnam. "He'll be a hero when he comes home," says Larry's dad, "and you'll be shot dead by the cops." Larry's brother does come home, but sooner than expected, and in a coffin. In this scene, Larry waits with his parents at a local mortuary for the arrival of Sam's body. Rose's eyes sparkled with a waxy redness as if something were becoming clear. as if after carrying the worry of Sam's death for so long, it might be almost a relief at last to have any outcome. Of course it was not. Retta's anger stood in for her sister's despair. "Death is evil," Retta later said quietly and only to Larry. "That is God's judgment. If death were good, God would die." "Maybe he already has," Larry answered, and then moved past Retta to sit on the couch with his father. Sam's remains arrived at Travis Air Force Base Sunday afternoon. The family was notified by a call from a Sergeant Robert Peterson, who said he would accompany the casket to its delivery destination. The Reverend was not preaching that Sunday, and for days had been taking condolence calls from members of the church who had heard of Sam's death, until at some point the Reverend could no longer bear it. Retta and Larry then answered the phone, and it was Larry who spoke to Sergeant Peterson. The soldier confirmed that Sam's coffin would be taken to the Harrison Funeral Home on San Pablo Avenue in Berkeley. At 2 p.m., Larry, his parents, and Retta and Mr. Harrison gathered in the funeral home's chapel. Mr. Harrison was one of the Reverend's old friends. They had gone to high school together in Oakland. The Reverend had preached numerous funerals for the clients of Mr. Harrison. A hearse arrived, and a white man in uniform stepped toward the chapel's entrance and introduced himself as Sergeant Peterson. He asked for the funeral director, and when Mr. Harrison appeared, along with Sam's family, the soldier handed him a letter. Mr. Harrison was a small man with a mustache and graying temples. His dark brown face had a jovial, portly appearance. His round belly pushed against a black Sunday suit coat as he opened the letter and read it. A couple of minutes passed in silence. "The coffin is sealed?" Mr. Harrison asked the sergeant. "Yes, sir," the soldier answered quickly, eager to finish his task. "The deceased is unviewable." "Unviewable?" Larry's mother cried out, incredulous. "What do you mean unviewable? I can't see my son?" Mr. Harrison asked Sergeant Peterson to go with him inside. "I'll be right back," Mr. Harrison told the family. Just wait, please." "What's he talking about?" Rose's voice rose in a surging crescendo of panic. "Unviewable? I need to see my boy." I can't." Larry walked toward the hearse. Inside he saw a metal casket covered by a large, bright American flag. Mr. Harrison stepped out of the chapel and yelled, "Josiah, Larry, come in here. I need you." Inside the chapel, Mr. Harrison tried to hand the letter to the Reverend, but he refused it and pointed to Larry. Larry took the letter and read it. He sighed a deep breath and turned to his father. "Here's what the letters say, Daddy. We are sorry that the circumstances of the deceased's death precluded restoring the remains to a viewable state." While Sergeant Peterson shifted nervously, Reverend Wiggins covered his face, turned away, and fell into a chair in the chapel lobby. "What's this mean, Mr. Harrison?" Larry asked urgently. Mr. Harrison drew him back to the rear of the chapel, away from the nervous soldier and inconsolable Reverend. "This is the deal," Mr. Harrison began. I've been here before. The coffin is sealed and no one can open it. They got a mortuary in Saigon where bodies first arrive. Morticians there, they are good. They spend hours working on bodies to make them into something that they can dress in a uniform and present to the family. Whatever happened to Sam? Well, there ain't enough of him left to make him look anything like he did before he died. And if they couldn't do anything to make him viewable, I know I can't. "Well, what's inside the coffin then?" Larry asked. "Like I said, whatever they could find," said Mr. Harrison. "I hate to put it that way, but it's the truth. What's left of Sam ain't pretty, and it's sealed in an airtight bag. Believe me, what's inside that coffin no one would recognize as Sam. No one would want to look at." "Shit," Larry said. "What am I going to tell Mom? She wanted an open casket."
Her children's poetry book. It's nice to see a poetry book just for children. And I love the title, Dragonfly Dreams.
So this book was illustrated, I have to give Colleen credit, she did such a beautiful job, by Colleen Dwyer. And so there's wonderful illustrations on all the pages, but there's a dragonfly hidden in every poem. So yeah, you can maybe find that. So I'm going to read my introduction to you, and then 2 of the poems. All right, let me see if I'm better with or without. I don't know. Can't see with them, can't see without. All right. This is to parents, teachers, and children. Almost everyone loves a rhyme, don't you think? We chant them when we're jumping rope. We scream them at football games. We sing them when we're playing patty cake games, and so on. They're especially fun to say out loud when you have a good rhythm, and even better when they're funny. This is a collection of poems for children that were written sometime over the last 10 years. They're best read aloud in 1 or 2 voices. I selected these for the rhythms or the rhymes and the imagery. They can be bedtime poems or naptime poems or anytime poems. Some are poems that older children might like to read to each other. Some are created from memories, and some are spun from dragonfly dreams. All are designed to be educational in that they acquaint the child with the past, the arts, and the world. And who doesn't love a story? The story poem section includes 3 poems that could be considered songs or ballads, and it might be fun for you to add a tune of your own. Enjoy. So, the first poem I'll read to you is In Wizard's Time. I had a hard time picking poems, but this was, one of them is an 80-year-old friend of mine, and he likes this one a lot, and the other one is an 8-year-old friend of mine, and he likes that one a lot. In Wizard's Time. If I could choose to go back to a time, it would be when the wizards sang in rhyme. They'd sing beside embers with their harps of legends old and golden carp. Fantastic stories they'd tell in verse. Good castle folk would listen with their purses tucked hidden into their girdles bind, where pickpockets would never find. Old Merlin, known as Merlin, stood apart, most famous for his prophecies and heart. 'Twas his idea of table round, where knights could equally sit down. At storytelling, Merlin was the best. When he told his tales, no child could rest. They'd hear the lore of Avalon, of Arthur's reign, and all gone wrong. Now some say Merlin ended in a cave, while others argue to the woods he gave his ardor, to the natural world, where leafy flora spread unfurled. But now I sit here in my favorite nook, illuminated letters paint my book of legends, myths, and tales in rhyme. Oh, take me back to wizard's time. And this other one is a very silly one. I'll show you the picture. This is the 8-year-old's favorite. It's called At the Airport, and you've probably experienced this sort of thing, I think. You've been at the airport lately. I went to the airport to fly to Japan. The porter, a leopard, was waving his fan. I queued up in line to purchase my ticket, threw open my passport, when out popped a cricket. The next tedious ordeal was security. Those darn panda bears would not set me free. Taking their time with the lizard's new weave, they frisked her and poked her and looked up her sleeve. A 15-ton pachyderm said she packed light. They didn't believe her and she missed her flight. They searched through her trunk for something suspicious, but all that they found were some peanuts and dishes. At last it was my turn. I took off my shoes, my jacket, and ring. I had nothing to lose. I trembled and stuttered, afraid I would fail, and that's when the panda discovered my tail. I ran down the corridor fast as I could. With no shoes or jewelry, I didn't look good. The pandas were chasing. I think there were 2. I screamed, "Help me, Lordy, this place is a zoo." Closer and closer those panda bears got. I pled, "Please have mercy." My voice shook a lot. Then, just as they reached me, I jumped on the plane. The doors slammed behind me and mussed up my mane.
It looks like another good book to buy as a gift, and love those poems. Thank you. I would like to introduce author Mara Johnstone. She will present her science fiction You'll love this title. A Swift Kick in the Thorax. Mara Johnstone.
How's that? Is that good height? No.
A little closer.
A little closer.
How's that?
Better.
Louder? Okay. I will attempt to talk into the microphone. So, the short description of this book is the dramatic bit here. When space poachers release Earth animals on an alien world, threatening a fragile new alliance, they anger the wrong people. A veterinarian, an accountant, and a furious sign language fluent gorilla are coming for them. So I'm going to read from a chapter where the veterinarian is taking a turn working at the zoo on an alien planet. This is a normal thing for her. It's chapter 8. When I'd first learned which animals humanity would be contributing to this zoo, I had an unprofessional giggle fit. I'd expected tigers and elephants, the type of impressive beasts that were staples of zoos at home. But everything earthly was impressive to these folks, so logic had dictated that we send only the safest choices. That meant pets and livestock. We had cats and dogs, pigs and ponies, 2 horses, and a small flock of chickens. I'd heard that sheep were next on the approved list, but there was no sign of them yet. Ponies remained one of the most popular, thanks to their temperaments and petting zoo experience. We could have set up a pony ride and they wouldn't have minded, but early discussions had found that the average turtledillo would be more frightened than excited by the experience. Why are its feet like that? Those are called hooves, I explained. Imagine if you had just one toe on each foot and the claw was big and flat. Weird! A lot of animals with hooves are a big help on my planet, I said, flicking a glance at the parents. Still not scowling. Good. They're good at pulling and carrying things. Some of the bigger ones even carry people. Whoa, said one child. How? Said another. Do you lie across its back? No, we ride it. I struck a wide-legged stance. This little pony is much too small for me, but there are 2 horses around the corner that way. They're taller than I am. What? That's so big! Yep. If you're still here this afternoon, you can watch me ride one. There's a sign that says what time it happens. The kids looked like I'd promised to ride a shark, impressed and alarmed in equal measures. I knew from experience that it was the idea of being on top of any large animal that scared them. They weren't natural climbers, these guys. Wobbling around at twice their own height would have been terrifying. Mom, can we watch? We'll check the sign. I want to see too. I smiled at all the approval. You wouldn't think humanity's reputation had taken a nosedive at all. I had been braced for an empty zoo, with no audience for when I put Flora through her paces. My riding skills were not expert level by any means, but I could stay in the saddle well enough, and on normal days, the turtledillos loved watching a qualified human ride a horse about. Positive signs, I told myself, positive signs. I finished up the petting zoo session and moved on to the next thing. The day was still young. While logic said that the only turtledillos to be visiting the Earth animals were those with a favorable opinion of Earth, I wasn't about to assume anything. For all I knew, protesters would show up to insist that all of the animals get shipped back. There were a few dirty looks at the first show and tell, from zoo visitors who sneered at the golden retrievers and kept walking. Oh well, they didn't get to see how well a dog can catch a tennis ball, or how happy these 2 were to run a simple obstacle course and earn crunchy treats. I only had 2 people stay for the second half, which was definitely their loss. The elderly couple were delighted to learn how a chicken worked. And when I presented them with 1 large wing feather each, shed, collected, and cleaned beforehand, they couldn't contain their joy. This is an honor, said the shorter female. We will get a display case made immediately. I was humbly waving off the gratitude when the taller female continued. These will be incredibly valuable in a few years when there are no more. She looked at me kindly. I hope you get some similar souvenirs to take back to your homeworld. Thanks. I'll see what I can do.
Mara writes fantastic science fiction with humor. I would like to welcome one of our vice presidents and our terrific newsletter editor and web sign developer in charge of websites, Chrissy Langwell. And she has written the contemporary romance with the great title, For the Birds.
Okay, so this is a second chance romance that actually takes place here, or it takes place in Petaluma and in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. So those of you who know Petaluma may recognize a couple of things. And because it's a second chance romance, what that means is this is a couple that broke apart, and a year later they meet again. He has moved on, she has not, but she fakes a relationship to save face, and then finds out that she and her ex have to work together. And I'm starting right in the middle, chapter 7. So if you want to know all the stuff that's happening around it, you'll have to buy the book. I'm also going to be attempting a Scottish accent. If you want to hear it better, you should buy the audiobook. Sunny and I stood there for a moment, words escaping. Oh, hold on, I need my eyes. Sunny and I stood there for a moment, words escaping us as we alternated petting Bowie, who was happily soaking up the attention. My hand accidentally brushed Sunny's a few times, sending electric shocks through my fingers and straight to my heart. The awkward silence grew between us, seeming louder than the bees happily humming as they flirted with the lavender blossoms. There was a time I knew everything he was thinking just by catching his eye. Now, I couldn't read him. I mustered the courage to take a peek at him. I thought I saw something familiar reflected in his eyes, but I couldn't trust it. My emotions were too strong to have any idea what he was feeling. "Thanks for bringing the wine," I said, relieving the mounting pressure of silence. "Right, let me grab it." Bowie and I watched Sunny walk away, and I felt a little ego boost when the dog chose to stay by me instead of running after him. It was little things. And then there was Sunny, lifting a heavy case of wine in his arms. Even under his t-shirt, I could see the bulge in his muscles, and holy hell. I swallowed hard, looking away as I tried to catch my shallow breath. 3 weeks of this. Could I handle it? "Where should I put these?" he asked, passing by me on his way to the front door. "On the porch is fine," I said, not ready to reveal it was Tay instead of Blake, who he thought was my boyfriend, but mostly because Avery, my bird, was loose under Tay's watchful eye. The bird had been doing better ever since I opened up the rest of the house to him. As long as we watched him, he didn't destroy anything. It had only been a few days, but I was already feeling settled with the bird. Still, I couldn't wait to save enough money to put an enclosure together for him. Any income left over from the Finnegan event would cover it, or at least come close. Sunny set the case on the porch, then trotted back to the truck for another. At the same time, Tay opened the door a crack. "Hey, I need to leave for class. Should I leave the bird out?" "No, I didn't have the chance to finish the thought." Bowie noticed the open door and bolted up the steps, pushing his way in before either of us could stop him. "The bird!" Tay and I raced after him, my heart thumping as I heard Avery screeching while Bowie barked. I'd only seen Bowie around other dogs, so I had no idea how he'd react to a bird. He was a good dog, but what of his instincts? Both dog and bird were now in the bird room. Avery clung to a large branch, leaning against the wall, and Bowie crouched down on his front paws, his butt wagging wildly in the air as he yipped at the bird. The bird flew across the room, and Bowie yelped, jumping up as if to try and catch it. If I weren't so freaked out for the bird's safety, I'd find humor in Bowie's grin, or how his tail wildly swept the air. I managed to grab the dog's collar, relieved that he didn't pull against it, as Tay tried to coax the bird to calm down. Bowie's tail never let up, wagging as he whined softly. "What's going on?" Sunny called, running into the room. He took one look at the bird in the corner and then took Bowie so I could help Tay with Avery. I managed to get Avery on my arm, but the bird flapped with fervent wings as I held him far from my face. "When did you get a bird?" Sunny asked, backing out of the room while Bowie tried to stay in. He tugged the dog out, then closed the door, trapping us in the room with the squawking bird. "Saturday," I yelled over the bird's noise. "You know how Meadow is always sending me strange gifts from her Instagram sponsors? This time it was a macaw." He stared at the bird as Tay retrieved Avery from the floor. The bird thankfully quieted down as Tay smoothed his feathers, clicking her tongue at him. "You're going to have to learn how to do this, you know," Tay said, then shifted her eyes towards Sunny in a pointed way, as if asking, "Is that him?" "I was getting to it," I huffed, ignoring her unspoken question. "Sunny, this is Tay, my assistant. Tay, this is Sunny, Edison McIntyre, Mr. Finnegan's marketing director. He was just dropping off some wine. Tay's eyebrows raised as she looked from me to him, then back at me. Mm-hmm, she said, her mouth twisting into a secret smile. Shut up, I mouthed to her, and she broke into a full grin. Wonderful to meet you, Sonny. It's so nice that you make house calls. Weren't you saying you have class? I asked, giving her the same pointed look she'd just thrown my way. Crap. Tay dropped the smile and raced to the door. Bowie's on the other side, and she nudged him with her knee as she made her escape. I'll call you later, she said as she closed the door, and I knew it would have nothing to do with work and everything to do with Sonny.
Thank you, Chrissy. It's going to be a good romance to read. I'd like to introduce author Robin Gabbert. She has been hosting Redwood Writers Salon at her house, and small groups of people go there and read from their books. So you might want to say hello to Robin. She will present her poetry book. It's pretty amazing what she did. She wrote the poems amid a clandestine lives of paintings. Pardon me. The name of the poetry book is The Clandestine Lives of Paintings. She has an assortment of Sonoma County paintings and others in the books that she wrote poems to the paintings. I hope I described it right.
Thank you, Judy. Thank you for being here today. Thank you, Jeannie, for organizing this daunting affair. This is a book of ekphrastic poetry, and ekphrastic poetry sounds pretty weird. Ekphrastic is a Greek word, but it merely means that the poems in the book are written to art, paintings, images. They could be written about a movie, or it could be written about a photograph. It could be written about a dream. This is what the book looks like, and Tommy is going to help me today. He's going to be my Vanna White when I start reading a couple of poems to actually show you the art, because we have art in here from 29 different artists from Sonoma, Marin, Napa counties, and a couple of other more well-known artists as well. But if you read my recent...
Closer to the mic, Robin. Closer to the mic.
Oh, if you read my recent guest blog for Marlene Cullen's The Right Spot, called Why I Love Writing Ekphrastic Poetry, you'll have some understanding of what this genre is all about. If you haven't read it, I just encourage you to look for it, Why I Love Writing Ekphrastic Poetry. But I'll get into it right now with reading some poems, and Tommy will show you the paintings, so you can kind of understand what it's all about, because it's not about just describing the paintings. It's about, I call it a dialogue between the painting and the poet. So this first painting you're seeing is called Observing the Night Sky by a painter named Jim McDonald. Are you a comet shooting across the sky so black and lonely? Or are you just a daisy plucked to your core, then launched into the abyss by those final words, she loves me not? The next poem is called Morning Walk Poppy. This is another short one, just to give you the flavor of this genre. Not yet light, moon playing through the mist, illuminating your face. Flower petals of shimmering egg yolk yellow, or a golden butterfly who's lost her way.
Beautiful.
This is a little bit longer. This is called The Gift, and it's another poem another painting by Jim McDonald. In the beginning, red ribbon looped my canary yellow package, so lovely on the dining room table next to the shiny green heart leaf-shaped philodendron. The box glowing in the sun. You must have noticed it too with your painter's eye, the crossed ribbons making window panes. Then I was in the garden. The package disappeared. You pled innocence. You'd been washing dishes, you said, but it appeared in your painting. Suddenly it was there among your other treasures. The close-up of a bumblebee, a man stepping into the dark, a face-off, a meteor storm, a beetle. It is now a window. I continue to stare and wonder, if I look long enough, whether its contents might finally be revealed. And the final poem is called Reconsidering Sorrow. This painting was done by Marion Stern. No expression on her vermilion lips, body wan, but her unmoving figure seems at peace, as we hope, as we wish for loved ones lost. The living stay tangled in nets of grief, in wisps and whispers of why didn't I? I should have. But reflecting on her dancing eyes, her laugh, tails and teases, how the wind played in her onyx hair, a smear of maple syrup on a crooked smile, her poems, the fog clears. Ghostly sisters hover, not to haunt or hinder us. She wants to hold us, wrap us in her fluffy skirt, wipe away sad tears with puffs of cloud.
Great.
That was quite a treat. I enjoyed that. I guess it's a way of looking at each painting and talking to it. I would like to introduce Susanna Solomon. She will present her short story book, Paris Beckons. Welcome, Susanna. This is going to be our last reading.
Is this close enough?
You're good.
Paris beckons. My mother was not privy to flights of fancy. She was practical, down to earth, and no nonsense. She was ordinary but beautiful, elegant but unhappy, resilient but weak, opinionated, forceful, and had a fury that scared me. Her rage, coupled with my father's, would make me cringe. Now, 50 years later, I ease my hands over her last letters to me, the 4-cent stamps, her unique handwriting, a life then full of secrets from her children. Not much news there, except for one thing. She had written about my father going to Paris by himself for a few weeks before she died. He had told me the same thing, but that was not really the case. He had gone there to meet his lover, an event that would change everything. Now that he was gone, I wanted to go to that same place and feel the ground that he had walked on and find answers to the questions that have haunted me all my life. Café de Magot. Could this be where he took her? I am standing across Boulevard Saint-Germain looking at Café de Magot. Tourists swarm around the cafe and in the crosswalks, pecking at their cell phones. My father, 54 years ago, had most likely sat at one of these very same tables, staring at a woman and holding her hands. The woman, a model, was looking back at him with passion in her eyes. She wasn't my mother. Mom had been at home, writing to us kids, while we were at camp, wondering when her husband would return. My father's feet had touched the same sidewalk that my feet touch now. He had no idea what effect his actions would have on him, his wife, and his children. Now, standing here in Paris, it all plays out under my feet. I watch the Seine roll by, my family history swirling and gathering and disappearing into the current. The dreams we had, the truth I tried to cling to, the lies my father told. And I believed him. I had been 14. A week later I was back in Paris, he had said, and I reached over for your mother in our bed, but she was gone. I got up and walked through the house, calling her name. From the kitchen I heard a motor running. In the barn I found your mother, asphyxiated in the car. The cops came. I can't tell you any more than that. A few days later he came to my camp to tell me the news. I remember the smell of horses, the breeze across the Vermont hills, the sound of gravel crunching under our feet. Years later, I look at the cafe and imagine him here. My father had smiled, placed some francs on the table, and helped the woman on with her coat. They walked away from the cafe under a moonlit night full of stars. Within a year, he brought her home, starting a new life built on lies. He never told me he knew her before my mother died. She sat where my mother used to sit, her back against the same yellow cushion in the kitchen. When my best friend told me that everyone knew they'd been having an affair for years before my mother died, I felt both sick and stupid. Eventually he married her. I couldn't look at my stepmother in the eye and refused to be a part of our family dinners anymore. My father yelled at me. If years can heal, then we want years, but they never erase the pain of betrayal. As a motherless 14-year-old, I had to make the decision to close my mind and harden my heart. I stopped feeling, focusing on just surviving. I went to school, did my homework, and kept my thoughts to myself. Life is hard, my father said. He threw away my mother's family history book that went back at least 100 years. Then he threw away most of her photos. It took me more than 50 years to get a few photos back. When people said you never get over it, I say they're right. Now Paris gleams under twilight. The lights along the Seine come on. Traffic flows by, green lights, red lights, amber lights. People, visitors and locals, cross or stand or gather or wonder about their own family histories, stuck in time and place, while lovers, holding hands, wander off into the moonlight and disappear. Thank you.
That was just one of 34 short stories in Susanna's book. She's a terrific writer. She's written quite a few books. I wanted to make sure I thanked all the people that helped me put this event together. If you could stand after I call your name. President Judy Baker, thank you for designing the brochure. Past President Roger Lubeck, you can see him behind Kelly. Past President Sean Langwell, behind the scenes, and Chrissy Langwell, Vice President, who helped design the brochure with Judy, and Milena El Jamali, Treasurer. Am I missing anyone?
Adele.
Oh, yes. My right hand lady, Adele. I always ask Adele, please help me hand out everything. And then she comes every day when we have our big Sonoma County Fair event, and I find her, quick, go talk to that person for me. So she's my right hand. Thank you, Adele.
Ask all the authors to come up in front.
Have all the authors go.
Okay, let me just finish.
Yeah, after you're done.
Yeah. If you want to know all their authors' websites or how to buy their book, you can go to the website redwoodwriters.org and you actually can see how you can buy the books, because you take the brochure back and you go, oh, I should have bought it. That's one thing. Second thing, please, again, say hello to the authors, thank them. This is their special day. Ask them questions and buy an autographed copy.